Local programming on KRWG Public Media made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to Fronteras, A Changing America. I'm Jonny Coker. In today's episode, we'll be taking an in-depth look at Ngage, New Mexico's newly launched Children's Museum. The museum was launched in an effort to bring early childhood educational opportunities to children in rural areas of the state. I have more in this report. Doña Ana County has a new children's museum for families to visit and explore with their young ones. But there's something unique about Ngage, New Mexico's Vamos Niños Interactive Museum. It's on wheels. Dozens of families lined up at Young Park in Las Cruces as part of the museum's launch event. Kimmy Cravens, development coordinator for Ngage, New Mexico, explained the need for a dedicated children's museum in the southern part of the state.
We realized many years ago that we needed a way to connect our families to different resources and supports that are in the community for them. And we thought the best way to do that and the best way to get families out was to build a children's museum. Because our county, and Doña Ana County, is nearly 4,000 square miles and it's so massive and there's so many barriers to transportation, we realized that doing a brick and mortar might not best serve as many families as possible. So we decided to move forward by doing a mobile children's museum, which is what you see here.
The mobile museum is a transformed 44-foot RV divided into 4 separate exhibits, ranging from interactive workbenches and microscopes to music and bubbles. Geared toward preschool-aged children 3 to 5 years old, Craven said Vamos Niños is still in its early stages, with plans for expansion in the future.
It's so amazing to see, 8, 9 years later, that this idea and these dreams that so many educators in our community had is now real, and it's a reality for everyone. And I think it's really important to teach families that play is learning, and kids learn through play and different experiences, and they can come play at a children's museum. They can play with bubbles and learn about breath and learn all different things. To them, it just looks like playing, but they really are learning and developing their skills in all the domains of their education while they do it.
According to a 2023 report by the Annie E. Casey Foundation, New Mexico ranks last among all states in childhood well-being. According to Valeria Holloway, a volunteer for Ngage, the goal of Vamos Niños is to bridge gaps for New Mexican children and bring science, technology, and art exhibits to kids in underserved areas of the state.
Children 0 to 5 need to have early childhood education no matter where they're from, whether rural or urban or suburban. And if they don't, they're already 5 years behind when they get to kindergarten. So we need to do our best to make sure that those 0 to 5 children are taken care of.
Holloway said she hopes the museum enables young visitors to nurture a love for learning, especially in areas of New Mexico where resources for a dedicated children's museum aren't readily available. The Mobile Children's Museum has already been to visit Hatch, Anthony, and Las Cruces, with plans to book more events around the county in the coming months. And now, joining me to talk about the Mobile Children's Museum and the importance of early childhood education is Abeer Al-Ghawi, the Assistant Director at Ngage, New Mexico. Abeer, thanks so much for being on the program today.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Of course. So, just to start off, what is the mission statement of Ngage, New Mexico, and how do you fit into that mission statement?
Sure. The mission of Ngage, New Mexico is to serve as a catalyst for change to advance the well-being of all people of southern New Mexico. And my role in that is I'm the assistant director, so I support the efforts of a prenatal to career education initiative called the Success Partnership. And in that role, we do is advance education outcomes in our county.
And tell me more about the Success Partnership. I mean, what exactly is it? Who do you work with, and what does that collaboration look like?
Sure. In that partnership is basically a network of community stakeholders. So we work with elected officials, families, educators, businesses, other nonprofits such as ourselves, and the faith-based community. And we all rally around this common belief that in order to create a sustainable and thriving community, education is a vehicle for change.
I see. And on Ngage New Mexico's website, there's something that popped up that that I noticed was this collective impact model, and that's something that I hear nonprofits talking about a lot in my work. But what exactly is that collective impact model, and how do you use it to make change within communities?
For sure. So collective impact is a method or strategy to get people to kind of come together and collaborate with a common belief. And that is, like, for example, ours is education. Education is that vehicle for change to improve people's lives and to allow them to succeed and thrive in their communities. So in order to do so, we engage with different segments of our community around this common belief. And by supporting each other's efforts, we don't believe in duplicating efforts, we believe in supporting each other with that common goal.
Mm-hmm. And another one of those words that I saw, or phrases that I saw that keep popping up, is capacity building. So what is capacity building, and how does that fit into everything we've just been talking about?
For sure. So Engage New Mexico, in the realm of collective impact, we are the primary backbone organization. So what that means is it's our job to facilitate and support the growth of a partnership around that common goal. And in order to do so, what we do is we build capacity as well amongst these nonprofits. So what we can do is we support them by helping them find resources, we support them with people power, we support them with helping them financially through joint funding efforts, going through grants together, that sort of thing.
I see. And Abeer, how long have you been with Engage New Mexico?
It'll be 6 years in August.
6 years, and you've been there a while. How have you seen this organization evolve and grow throughout the years? I mean, how has that been, being part of the whole process?
For sure. So I came in right as a couple months after our executive director, Lori Martinez, took over, and it's been such a pleasure to see the growth in terms of capacity building of other nonprofits. So what we've done is hosted a couple of conferences where we provide professional development opportunities for nonprofits at a very low cost locally, and that is almost unheard of in this part of New Mexico, because typically you have to kind of go up north to get professional development or out of state. So that's one of the ways that we have I've seen the evolution of the organization, as well as building such a robust success partnership while I've been there. When I joined, we only had the Early Childhood Coalition, which kind of addressed that prenatal to age 8 range. And since I've been there, we've launched a Kindergarten to Career Coalition as well to address the rest of that continuum of support for individuals.
Wow. And going back to what you're saying, some of these programs are a very new thing for people in southern New Mexico and the rural areas of the state. And I want to talk about the Vamos Niños roaming children's museum, the mobile children's museum. How important is it to have something that you can bring to different communities, especially within rural areas of the state that may not have these resources at all?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So Vamos Niños was born out of the Early Childhood Coalition. It was this idea of how can we address disparities when it comes to accessing early childhood education and meeting people where they're at. For example, Doña County, and within Doña County, we have 37 colonias, which are really rural communities where there's a lack of infrastructure and access to kind of those types of experiences. So Vamos Niños was created with the idea of bringing these fun early childhood experiences to families and children, and also creating a caravan of services. So it's not just going to be Vamos Niños, but we, in partnership as part of our collective impact model, is creating this caravan of services where you have other organizations that serve those areas come out with us to provide information to families on services and that are offered to them. And
so tell me about the inception of Vamos Niños. I know it's been a long time in the works, and through the pandemic, from what I understand, there were some speed bumps. So let's just start at the beginning. What was the inception of the idea, and how did y'all get to where you are now?
For sure. So the idea has been 10 years in the making, actually. So it started within the Early Childhood Coalition as just this unique innovative way of addressing disparities in early childhood education. For example, in Doña Ana County, according to the U.S. Census, there are 5.5% of children under the age of 5 living here, and only around like 3% are actually enrolled in quality early childhood programming. So Vamos Niños is part of that vehicle to kind of fill the gap. And in order to do so, we had community stakeholders come together and an all-volunteer committee of experts who joined us in planning for Vamos Niños throughout the years. So
I see.
Yeah.
And so how did you come up, or not you, but how did not Vamos Niños, how did Ngage New Mexico come up with the exhibits within the Mobile Children's Museum? Because I know there are essentially certain educational exhibits that show different things, like there's a color station essentially that shows kids like the basics of color and like adding red and blue together and what type, essentially just those types of early childhood preschool things. So how do y'all come up with these exhibits?
So it was a very intentional process within the volunteer museum committee. So the museum committee was made up of early childhood educators as well as community members with an interest in education and young children. So it was a series of conversations with experts in the field and experts who know their community, and thinking about what is most beneficial to children, as well as thinking about like New Mexico's early childhood standards for education as well. And with a STEM-based focus, Vamos Niños came about deciding on the exhibits for it.
I see. And so how do you, New Mexico is such a big state and a very diverse state. How can you make sure that, all children are included, whether they come from a different cultural background or or even, children dealing with disabilities maybe? Is that something that y'all had in mind when developing all these exhibits?
Absolutely. From the very start, the intention was to have a mobile museum that reflected the community of Doña Ana County in southern New Mexico. And with that in mind, it is fully bilingual. The staff that go with Vamos Niños are bilingual, so in English and in Spanish. Everything in the vehicle is bilingual. So we hope that when families and young children visit, they see their community reflected in the exhibits that are offered and the resources available. And from what I understand, it's still very early on in the process of the launching of Vamos Niños, and I wanted to know, how has that process been? I know you've been to Hatch, I know you've been to Anthony. From your perspective, how has this launch gone, and what has the community reception been like? It's been super exciting to see families visit. So we've had 3 launch events, as you've mentioned, and each one has just gotten better and better. Just seeing the excitement in children's faces and their families has been so rewarding, especially after putting in 10 years of work into the project. Nothing like this exists in our region. So it's the first of its kind. So it's been very welcoming and very hopeful, and there are definitely opportunities for collaboration with our community to kind of support Vamos Niños.
And so what does that collaboration look like? Have you had conversations with, government entities in more rural communities, let's say, or maybe other nonprofits or community centers? Has there been that reaching out, and how has that process been?
Absolutely. So even with our launch events, they've been collaborative in nature. For example, the one in Hatch was in partnership with Jardín de los Niños, who are now operating in Hatch, as well as Little Footprints Early Childhood Center. We've also had Amador Health Clinic join us in that launch event. So that's a way that we've built those collaborations, and we'll just keep building on them.
I see. And so, Vamos Niños, so far, the scope is within Doña Ana County, is that correct?
Yes.
And is there plans in the future to maybe move beyond Doña Ana County into other areas of the state? Is there plans for that?
Absolutely. So, and within our first year of operation, our focus will be exclusively Doña Ana County, but Engage's mission is to serve all of southern New Mexico. So we hope within the next 3 years or so to kind of serve most of southern New Mexico, but our focus remains on southern New Mexico because of the lack of opportunities like this. So, the northern part of the state has a lot more options when it comes to it. So we really want to make sure that we're intentional and maintain our commitment to our mission of serving southern New Mexico and Doña Ana County.
And so what would you like to see come out of the Children's Museum? I mean, you're bringing these STEM opportunities and some arts, some musical instruments I saw that were really great, that the kids were having fun with xylophones. But what is the ultimate goal? I mean, what would you like to see come out of this and see children coming out of it with and families? What is the goal?
The goal is to create meaningful engagement of families and their children in a fun-filled environment that is safe to explore, play, and learn. And that play through learn is a thing. And it leads to better outcomes for child development. And healthy children means healthy adults.
And I understand this might be hard to measure, but is Ngage New Mexico engaged in looking for ways to measure the success of successful outcomes of programs like this?
Absolutely. So part of our collective model is also continuous analysis and shared measurement, and that is also part of Vamos Niños. So we work very closely with the Center for Community Analysis at NMSU to collect data. So as families and as we roam through Doña Ana County, we will collect number of visitors, we will try and measure impact, create surveys post-events to see the impact of the work that we're doing.
I see. And so how do you feel the community has been mostly supportive of this type of thing in terms of when you guys show up to events? It seems to be mostly a positive reception. Do you feel supported?
Absolutely. Our last launch event, was in Las Cruces last Friday, April 19th, and we had around 86 families show up to that event, and it was just absolutely fantastic. There is 100% community support. We also had local agencies show up who heard about us and were giving us our business cards and saying, let's collaborate, let's do something together. So it has been very positive.
And I understand, y'all work with state level legislators as well. What does that collaboration look like, and how supported do y'all feel by the state legislature? Is there enough being done there, and do you feel like you're properly supported by that entity?
Absolutely. So Vamos Niños would not have been possible without the financial support of private foundations, private donors, and as well as congressionally directed dollars that came by. And also we've had a senator and a representative from the state who have been very supportive of the project, and we continue to build on that support. So with the next, legislative session, we're going to be rolling Vamos Niños up there to the Roundhouse. So it's super exciting. There definitely is support. And in fact, we'll be partnering with the Farm and Ranch Museum in June on a special event.
And, in New Mexico, the state has consistently ranked extremely low in terms of childhood well-being and education. So, what's your argument for Vamos Niños, and I guess Ngage New Mexico in general, in terms of trying to help bridge those gaps and trying to get New Mexico up to par with other states in terms of our educational programming and outcomes for children coming out of the state?
Absolutely. So a very important part of Vamos Niños is our Family Resource Center. So within that resource center, we have a referral database. So as families come on board and are interested in services, our job will be to connect them with available resources for early childhood education, social services, anything that will help build on that. Vamos Niños is a vehicle for that because it is mobile. It travels to the communities and oftentimes transportation is a big hindrance and barrier, as well as language, to accessing those kind of resources.
And does Ngage New Mexico, is it involved with any sort of policy work or maybe not lobbying, but that type of work in terms of changing the way that we look at education in New Mexico, especially on the state level and within the state legislature?
Absolutely, we are. we have done a lot of advocacy work in early childhood education. We have partnered with such entities as like Save the Children Action Network, which we recently went up with them to the Roundhouse for the Early Childhood Day to advocate for livable wages for most impactful and important early childhood educators. So that's just one of the examples that where we do, because we believe in order to create lasting change, you kind of also need to address the top.
Right, and this is, I mean, this is a big question, but from your perspective, I mean, what does New Mexico need to do to get on par with those other states? What are the most important policy changes or cultural changes or whatever it is to be able to make sure that our children are getting the same level of care and quality programming and education that other kids in other states are getting?
Continued investment in early childhood education is absolutely key in order to change that. Also, there was a Yazzie Martinez lawsuit that basically ruled that children in New Mexico are not receiving adequate education across whether it's disabilities, multicultural, and all of that. So in order to see lasting change, the state does need to address that lawsuit and stay true to the outcomes of it and address them.
And yeah, the New Mexico's on the state level does have a lot of controversy, especially surrounding children and even like CYFD and things like that. But what can New Mexicans do on an individual basis to try to push for this type of change?
Talk to your legislators. It's so important for legislators to hear from community and from average New Mexicans about their thoughts around education, access to education, child well-being. If we as a community come together and raise our voice, change will happen. But as long as people remain silent or not as vocal, that's where there's a gap, I believe, between like the legislature and average New Mexicans. And also on another level, like New Mexicans can volunteer in such organizations as like Vamos Niños. We're going to be looking for volunteers. That's an easy way to kind of impact your local community and impact those, those indicators of child well-being and education.
And Abeer, speaking about Vamos Niños, coming back to that, where do you see this project being within the next couple of years? Are there plans for evolution or expansion with Vamos Niños?
Absolutely. Vamos Niños is actually phase 2 of our larger children's museum project. Phase 1 was a pilot exhibit program to gauge interest around the community for something like this. And now phase 2 is our mobile children's museum, and phase 3 will be a brick and mortar children's museum. So we definitely have plans for expansion into the future with the children's museum project. So yes.
And where would that brick and mortar museum be in theory?
Definitely within Doñana County. Las Cruces may be a location for that. It really does depend on partnerships and funding opportunities.
I see. I mean, in a perfect world, or maybe let's just talk theoretically, do you see maybe the Mobile Children's Museum working out of this brick and mortar, like you guys have this big facility and then you send out the mobile museum to children in underserved communities? Is that kind of the idea?
Definitely. It is definitely part of the idea to have the Mobile Children's Museum working within the brick and mortar museum. So definitely a close partnership and collaboration between the two.
And so where can folks find out more about Vamos Niños and about Ngage New Mexico in general, because I know y'all are still early in the development of this, and but where can people find y'all essentially?
For sure. So for Vamos Niños, we have a website, www.vamosniños.org, where we have a fact sheet and information on Vamos Niños. And when scheduling becomes available and events become available, they'll be reflected on the website. Vamos Niños also has an Instagram page, so it's Vamos Niños, and a Facebook page where we share updates on the Children's Museum and where we're at. And
Abeer, what is one thing you would want people to walk away from with this interview about Ngage New Mexico, about your work, and about the importance of bringing something like Vamos Niños to communities around rural areas of New Mexico?
Absolutely. I believe what I want people to take away from this is that when community comes together, change happens, and at times we focus a little too much on the negative aspects rather than thinking about the possibilities and opportunities out there. So while this took 10 years, it's actually here now. And as long as you don't lose hope and you continue to build on your dream, it is possible for it to come to fruition.
Well, that's a beautiful sentiment. Thank you so much for being here for this interview today. Abeer Al-Ghawi is the Assistant Director for Ngage, New Mexico. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you very much for having me.
That's all for today's episode. Remember, you can stay up to date on the latest local news at krwg.org. For KRWG Public Media, I'm Jonny Coker. We'll see you next time on Fronteras, A Changing America.